Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us again for another edition of Women's Spotlight. For those of you out there, it's your first time watching this. The reason we do this every month is to allow you out there as women or men to see how we can go out there and expand into the life of our dreams. How can we remove limiting beliefs? How can we step into expansion? How can we diversify our portfolio and just really step into everything that our heart and mind and body desires? And this month's no different. With me this month, you'll have to mind my voice. It's a little bit lost, but I'll try my best when I'm talking with Trish Snyder. Trish Snyder is, I'm going to say, one of the best copywriters out there. She's been working at it for over 20 years, and she's taken all that skill that she's developed and created a framework to help entrepreneurs jumpstart their business and copywriters really increase the benefit of their copyright to their end users. Her whole desire is to make sure that she's being able to spark an emotional connection with our end users and be able to really deliver valuable content. But that's not all. She's also, like many of us, addicted to giving back to her community and really focuses in on mental health as well as being a good, environmentally friendly person. And we're going to hear all about her adventures and where that environmental focus has taken her. So instead of me just sitting here talking about it, let me introduce Trish. Trish Snyder, thank you for joining us on the Women's Spotlight.
Oh, thank you for inviting me to be here. It's an absolute pleasure.
Well, I'll tell you, I am so thankful for your patience with me. As busy women sometimes do get, I've had to move this meeting 4 times. So I am excited to finally be able to get this going. So tell us, Trish, I mean, you are running this copyright business. What made you decide to go from a award-winning copywriter who's gotten over 4 or 5 different awards to deciding to create this framework for entrepreneurs and other copywriters to help them with their business?
Hmm, I love that. So, have you ever heard the expression, give a person a fish and feed them for a day, but teach them to fish and you feed them for life?
I love
That
it.
is, yeah, that expression really inspired me because for most of my career, I've been the person giving people fish. So by that, I mean, I started in the magazine world and I would be a writer or an editor on staff at 3 best-selling magazines and their websites. And my job was to either create content or help others create content. And that went really well. It was fun. I learned a lot, transitioned into running my own business, doing marketing communications, and very organically started to get some interesting projects helping brands communicate in a way that the average person could understand and get excited about it instead of it reading like really dry business copy. And from there, I started to network with other women entrepreneurs. And a lot of my business clients up to then had been larger corporations, foundations. They had marketing teams, they had budgets, they had big goals and expectations to meet. So they would hire me and our team to create content. And I started to network with other entrepreneurs, other women like myself and like yourself. And what I discovered was all kinds of women who have incredible talent at what they do. They're top of their game. Are extremely accomplished, so passionate, and they were terrible at talking about it in their content. Like they just didn't know what worked. They were, giving lots of features and benefits, not making any kind of deliberate effort to create an emotional impact, talking about things that might have been interesting to them, or they were just ticking a box, creating content every day for their social media, or saying I have a website and putting the website out. But I would look at it and just want to give them a hug and then just take the keyboard away and say, let me at that for a few hours. And the challenge was a lot of them were, like many of us, we're funding our own way to a certain degree. We don't necessarily have the resources to hire a big agency to do that kind of work for us as much as we would like to. So I thought, well, if I can't do it for them, I want to help them do it better for themselves. I want to help them transform the way they communicate about their business in writing. And not just in writing, because I think storytelling refers to what you put in print or in digital, but also in the conversations you're having about your brand. So I wanted to sort of figure out, okay, I've been doing this for 20 plus years. How do I make someone else capable of doing something just as powerful without having to spend 20 years doing it? Because their zone of genius is whatever product or service that they do. How can I sort of bring my zone of genius into their radar so that they know what to say, how to say it, and actually create content that is effective without spending a ton of money or a ton of time? So that was the challenge that I set for myself, was to kind of solve that problem of just content that was ticking a box but not striking a chord with people.
I love that. And I love that you leverage that to create even the name of your course. Brand Story Workshop is great because through the power of storytelling, that's where life lives. It's not the feature function benefit. It's what does that do for someone? How does that change someone's life? How does that
Yeah.
make someone avoid pain, which we know as a human, we often are striving for.
Yeah.
So when we're trying to create this more story, and we've heard about story branding in all different types of methodologies. But to me, what that means is connecting with someone through shared experiences and stories, as opposed to some features on a list. Have you always sort of led the conversation, the writing, the pieces that way? Or was this something that more evolved over time? And what I mean by that is some of us are natural born storytellers and some of us just are not. And when it comes to work, sometimes what I've noticed, or in a corporate career or in your business, even if you are a natural born storyteller, you sometimes quiet that and get into the lingo of the industry. So help me understand how all of those different components morphed and when you realized the power of storytelling.
Okay, so what a great question. I feel like I need to break that into a few answers.
Sure.
The lingo, I'm gonna start with the lingo because it's so important. I find that as a an expert, a leader in your industry, a thought leader, someone who's spent a lot of time in a certain sector or running a certain type of business, you get really comfortable talking about your business in a certain way. And you sometimes assume that your clients use the same language, but they don't. So one thing I really help people do is sit at the other side of the desk and say, you are an expert for a reason, but that's great. What you need to do is take yourself back to how your client speaks and what we use the language that they would use to describe the problem, and take a beginner's approach so that you are not using insider speak or lingo or jargon that maybe you and your peers would understand if you were all having a conference together, but you're not having a conference with your peers. You're trying to have a conversation with your customer. So use language and ideas and beliefs and thoughts and feelings that your customer is going to resonate with, because that helps build trust. And that, is so, so important for the types of businesses that I speak with.
Yeah, and I'll just step in there for a moment because I'm in the tech world. I'm a regional vice president in a tech company. And this is what we do all day long is throw around acronyms that nobody really knows what they mean. Perhaps the architect in the tech in the tech side of the house might, but certainly the executive team don't always play with that same lingo and certainly those acronyms. So that's really true. And so you had a second part to that. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so it's to add on to that, it's the concept of knowing your audience. So if you're a tech company that sells to other tech companies and you do all speak the same language, then absolutely you can wow them with your lingo vocabulary. But if you're not selling to other experts in your field, then that's where you have to step back and go, how does my customer look at this? What's the kind of language or word choices or frustrations I should be talking to them about? So you asked earlier about, how did I come about knowing that storytelling was so powerful? I think in two ways, maybe three. Number one, having come from the magazine industry and starting my career as a journalist, first I studied journalism, then I went out and applied it, and very quickly established myself and had a really amazing career working with incredible mentors. So number one, I would say mentorship. And that meant being able to study very closely in real time with people who were at the top of their field in terms of storytelling. And in this case, it was telling narratives that were going to connect with women. All of the magazines that I wrote for and edited for were women's lifestyle magazines. So it was like connecting heart to heart. So that mentorship and guidance that I had was really important. Number two, I'm a complete nerd and I love to dive into topics. And so once I heard about this concept called brand storytelling or storytelling marketing, I was like, what? That is a thing? I've never heard of this before. So then I just started to get curious and get interested and start reading and studying and practicing and observing. And what was great was I had the liberty of being able to have a roster of clients who were hiring me for storytelling without necessarily knowing that that was what I was doing. Or, I didn't need to use that lingo with them because they just thought like, oh, we need something that's written really well. And because I always was writing for everyday audiences, like, the average person, I was good at bringing things down to a very sort of practical and emotionally rich level. So it was the study and then the application and then watching and learning like, oh, this completely flopped. Oh, that one did not. Let me analyze what worked and what didn't. And, make some educated guesses and then keep practicing and trying different things. And over a career that has lasted a couple of decades, it's been really easy for me to, and especially in the rise of digital marketing where you can have analytics. Back in magazines, it was, well, how many copies are sold on the newsstand of that article, of that issue? Well, the cover lines must have been really good or whatever. So yeah, I think sort of that interesting combination of just being a nerd, embracing my nerdy side, and embracing the sort of spirit of discovery that comes along with, I think, social media, digital marketing. The ability to put something out there that isn't in print gives us so much freedom to say, oh, well, we blew it, or oh, we nailed it, and to continue evolving from there and, taking the wins and repeating them in new ways.
Wow, that's amazing. There's three things you talked about that I want to zone in on a little bit. Mentorship, which is so important for us to mentor other women and to be mentored and see where we can grow. You talked a little bit about what I call curiosity and being able to have a curiosity mindset and go out and look at things with a fresh perspective. And you also talked a little bit about just being open to growing and expanding in all of yourself, because you talked about, I'm a copywriter and I'm heart-based is what I'm detecting from you, but I'm also a nerd, which means I'm really in my logic brain. So my logic brain wants to take over when my heart is trying to express this really rosy conversation. So the balance between the two. So I'd love to zone in on all three of those. Why don't we start with the mentorship? Tell me how important mentorship has been in your life and how are you mentoring other people?
Massively, as much as possible. So massively important to me because I guess I didn't really understand what mentorship was until someone in my life offered to take an interest and spend some time with me and again have some curiosity, see some potential, and then try to nurture that and answer my questions, give me advice when I asked for it, open doors for me, make introductions, challenge me. I feel like maybe the first mentor I ever had was without a doubt one of my high school gym teachers. So she saw
Mine
in
too,
me,
actually. Mine too.
right?
That's so
What is it?
funny.
She saw something in me that I, in my, like shy, nerdiness back in the day, did not see. And like for a while, I actually refused to see it. I was like, no, you've got the wrong person. Like that's not me. I'm not a leader. Whatever. Like I'll be over here in the corner. And she just refused to take no for an answer. She put me in this, leadership opportunity where I went away with other young women and we all got to bond and hang out and learn. And then from there, I started to pursue leadership on my own, which never would have occurred to me before. So starting in high school, continuing in university, where I had a couple of professors who introduced me to people in the magazine world. On my own, I sort of took a deep breath and reached out and said, I have time off at Christmas. Do you need any interns? And, Canada's leading women's magazine at the time said, we are desperate for interns. Yes, please come on in. And there, the managing editor, who was at the time a guy named Ivor Shapiro, was the most patient, nurturing person I could ever have imagined. And so he was always very great at guiding me toward just learning one or two things in each of our interactions that I could apply the next time. And it served both of us. He got better work out of me, and I got more from myself. And that continued throughout my career with other editors in the magazine world. And then when I went out on my own, and even when I was in the magazine world, anybody who approached me and said, oh, my kid is interested in journalism, send them my way. Let's have a conversation. Let's get together for a coffee. Send me your questions. I'd be happy to answer them. We can have a call or whatever it is. Opening doors for people, making introductions, and doing the same thing for others that Miss Robertson, my phys ed teacher, had done for me. Just like seeing something in them and calling it out and saying, you've got this thing and it's really special, and just sort of helping reflect to them something that they may not have noticed themselves, or at least acknowledging it and validating it, and allowing them to celebrate it and maybe push themselves a little further. So I mean, I actually don't have like an official, I offer mentoring, but everybody who knows me knows that I do. So people are always sending it often is young people, students who are either just starting out, want to build a portfolio and a career in writing. And I've had a successful career in both. And so off we go and get to have, an hour together. And I just try to leave them feeling inspired to continue and follow that dream, because I know it's not easy to make a living as a writer. My parents were, bless their hearts, they wanted me to do something more practical, but I was like, but I really like this and I think I'm good at it. So they were supportive, but not all families are. They expect you to go into something more practical, again, more logical, more conscious mind. And I just had to always follow my heart. But then I wanted my mind to be able to understand what was going on when I was able to open hearts. So that's where the two sides came together.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's so funny because we have so many parallels, and I'm sure many of the people listening to this also have similar parallels, because I remember a teacher, her name was Miss Dixon, and she was my history teacher. And I would come in and I was not at the time, I did not think I was a smart child. Let's put it that way. I was more of a rough tomboy type, and out in my sports and karate and kicking, butt. And I remember I would go in after class and I would ask her questions about, slavery and women and humanity, and she would always be like, Tara, you have so many questions, right? And so she gave me this history award, and I remember walking across stage and I got this award, and I couldn't fathom it that I would get a history award of all things. And I will never forget her. She was a mentor because she would take time after school and answer my questions. But then she enabled me to see the light in me that I couldn't see, which sounds very similar to what you're saying. And when she got up there on that stage, even though I was in grade 7, I'll never forget it. the way she articulated my curiosity and desire to understand where we had been to make a difference in the future, it changed my whole perspective on myself. And this is the power we have. And the other thing that I'd like to touch on that you said was, I don't have an official mentorship program. This is one of my core philosophies. We can lead without having anything be official. If we can just bring the generosity and the curiosity and the ability to give back in everything we do, if we can believe in ourselves and step forward through the fear in everything we do, then titles and programs are not needed, because that's just how we show up in the world.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And it actually makes me realize, I mean, whenever I'm giving opportunities to young writers, though I'm thinking specifically right now of some of the writers that I hire for projects. One of them is young, lovely, it's enthusiastic. I absolutely love working with her. We have a blast together, and she's very coachable. Right? Her mind is wide open. She takes feedback really well, and so it's a joy to work with somebody like that who is just hungry for it and wants to sponge up all of the sort of wisdom and experience that I've had. And like, I know she's going to be 1,000 times more successful than I ever was. And I want that for her. Like, I just like, however I can help lift somebody up I'm in for it. And the other way that I sort of do it, it's kind of, I call it the gift with purchase that I would never advertise on the workshop is, but when I do welcome it, so far it has been all women entrepreneurs into this program that I offer. It's a group program, very small. I really am mentoring them and helping them see, because I have an outsider's perspective, helping them see past all of the spinning stuff that's in their head, all the difficulty that they've had in getting to the point that they have got to, and just allowing them to celebrate their incredible creation, the business that they've created, the ideas that they've brought to life, the way that they're making a difference in helping others. So I know that I offer sort of mentorship in the ability to be able to take pride and own how awesome they are, and not feel bad about it. In fact, go, hell yeah, like I am. Look at this rap sheet of mine.
Yes.
So it's
Don't do
really,
that well as women, do we? We are not able to see our light all the time, and it's really hard
yeah.
to articulate the value we bring to the table, because many times we're forced to conform and contort and put ourselves in a box. And especially in entrepreneurship or leadership, what I've seen is many times we follow what we perceive to be the main leaders, which have predominantly been men. And so it's hard for us to step into our femininity, our light, and shine as women, but that's really the only way that we can make a true impact. And so coming at it with curiosity would be the second thing that we said we wanted to zoom in on. And you touched on it a little bit, because when you're mentioning the person, one of the people you're mentoring, pardon me, you said she was coachable. And being coachable means being curious many times, doesn't it? So tell me
Yes.
a little bit about curiosity and being coachable, and how that's, served you and others in your life.
So I have a couple of, if we're going to go there, I'm going to go there with you. I have always been curious in a very like, be the A student, do more than you have to. So that curiosity has always served me well in terms of like, I love to read, always loved to read as a kid, always loved to learn facts, loved the game Trivial Pursuit, just like super nerdy, and watching shows like Jeopardy. So it was in a very traditional curiosity sense, for like, well, if I'm knowledgeable, I will be successful. That was like an old definition of curious. And speaking of coachable, I'm going to tie that in the last, I guess it was about 3 years ago now, almost exactly 3 years ago, I started working with a coach. And I redefined what curious means to me within the context of not just learning with my sort of A student paradigm, but instead learning to break free from the perfectionism that had kept me in a very stuck place when it came to wanting to try new things, wanting to learn new things, wanting to give myself permission to be curious about something and possibly suck at it for a while I figured things out and allowed myself the grace to actually make instead of making performance my goal, it was like discoveries. I'm going to see how many discoveries I can make on this adventure instead of like how many A pluses can I get. So I really have evolved, and I would say matured, my definition of curiosity, and just being curious about myself all the time. Like, oh, that's so interesting that I do that in a conversation. Like looking at my patterns and being able to see certain tendencies in myself, certain preferences in myself, that allows me to question them and sort of stand back a little bit, be aware of them, question them, decide if I like, do I want that? Is it helping me? And if not, be able to evaluate, well, what would I rather be like? And how can I sort of start at a very thinking mind level to change some of these habits so that they do serve me? So I'm trying to direct my curiosity in different ways, both internally and externally, and for different reasons. And it's made a massive difference.
Wow. So I would love to explore next the perfectionism issue. But
Oof.
before we do, we're going to merge, because you've started to talk about it, into the last point that we wanted to zoom in before. And that was that diversifying yourself, that was stepping into all of yourself. And you just sort of started to talk about that, right? Is how do we love that logical nerd side while being creative, fun, and exploratory, all in the same sense, and merging that together to be a complete person. So that journey you explained over the last 3 years with a coach, working with a coach is always wonderful. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a coach, but it really helps us explore ourselves and explore our triggers and wonder, why do we act the way we act, and get out of our subconscious behavior and bring a conscious light to it and really be able to connect the dots. But I'd also like to take that a step further to see, in having that full representation of yourself and exploring yourself fully like that, how has that changed how you've shown up in the world? How has that changed how you view others?
I don't recognize myself from the person I was 3 years ago. I was accomplished but insecure, accomplished and judgmental of myself as heck. And of course, that was being projected onto other people, where I would be very critical of others because of how critical I was of myself. I couldn't really see any of it. So being able to work with a coach, use her methodology and the group, this was a group coaching program, and really dig in and be curious and be just determined to, like, explore, see what was going on, like to pull back the curtain and see, well, if I was I a perfectionist? Like, at first I was like, oh no, that doesn't describe me. And people pleasing, no, that can't be me, right? Like, they must be talking about someone else. And then
People
I
pleasing
would,
me? Never.
oh, are you kidding? Oh, I'm yeah, no. And then I started to become aware of all of the little ways that I was that way. And being able to see that now and not judge myself for it is the most incredible gift, because I remember at a point where I first made the realization and did connect the dots, I was like, oh, horrified, angry. I just had for so many years been in this habit of beating myself up inside all the time. And I realized people would describe me as so warm, so kind, compassionate, loving. And I would listen to myself talk to my daughter and my son and my husband and my beloved sister and dad. And there would be this, really loving approach. And then sometimes after I started coaching, being coached, I would sort of listen to the dialogue going on in my head and go, oh, I would never say those things to the people I love.
Mm,
Why do I think it's okay to speak like that to myself? And what is that costing me?
mhm.
Right? What
Yes.
has that? I remember, I remember putting myself to bed for a couple of days when I realized, like, what has that cost me over time? This refusal to accept mistakes, failure, learning, like the judgment that came from myself to myself in the past that just kept me behind this tiny little, in a little box with a very small comfort zone. And I started to look and go, oh, like, what if I look at all the ways I've probably not explored and expressed myself fully, done what I was put here to do, all those things. And I was like judging the judgment. It was like incredible.
Mm,
I can look at it now and laugh, but at the time I was not. I was so emotional. I was like the bottom of this emotional spiral, and it took a while for me to work myself out of it and go, well, that's it. I'm not doing that anymore. Like
mm.
it's just so toxic and harmful. But that's one of the gifts, quote unquote, that you get with coaching is you're not necessarily what I found. I didn't always like what I saw, but at least when I saw it, I knew that I could do something about it because the tools and the support that I received in coaching and was very open to receiving because by then I was able to really shift how I looked at new experiences. I was able to make dramatic changes in myself. There's no way I would have launched this agency ever, not much less in the middle of a pandemic, if I had not been putting myself under a microscope and really questioning, like, what am I willing to continue to accept from myself? And what am I drawing a boundary and no longer accepting? And so, yeah, does that help?
That's very powerful. And,
Yeah,
it is a form of self-love to be able to look at yourself that deeply and to be able to love and care for yourself that deeply, to see that there's this inner saboteur going on in your mind that's speaking so cruelly to yourself. And it's not until you can witness it that you can change the dialogue and you can be more loving and you can be more forgiving. And
hmm,
I believe that once you do that within, it makes your external relationships so much different because you're no longer projecting your inner fears and wounds onto others.
a
And
hundred
just as
percent.
you see your light, now their light is more prevalent to you and you can pick it up. And when you are annoyed, you can understand where they're coming from and
Yeah,
execute from empathy, right? So how have
totally.
your relationships changed with all this inner work?
Mm. My husband and I have been together for 25 years as of
Oh, let me
August.
congratulations on that one.
Thank you.
That's amazing.
Thank you. There was a period of time where things were pretty tense and I wasn't sure what was going to happen. We were both unhappy. We were both not giving or getting what we wanted from the relationship. And we were both blaming the other person, right? It's way easier to blame somebody else. And it wasn't until I was started coaching that I, uh, you know, really dug into the concept of personal responsibility. Like, what is on me? How and I was questioning, well, how do I show up for others? And wow, look how stingy I am with him sometimes. Why? What's that all about? Like, what if I was as generous, you know, at leaving him with a sense of increase as I am with leaving others with a sense of increase? And so I really had to do, you talked about forgiveness. I had to forgive myself. I had to forgive him. There were certain things that I know in a court of law would have held up as in like, okay, that's pretty crappy. We agree with you. But is it grounds to be, completely unloving, judgmental, critical? No. And so I had to own my stuff and ask forgiveness from him and to forgive myself and to start, as you say, shining a light on all the things that I absolutely loved about him and was so grateful for and admired. And the more I sort of took an interest and paid attention to the things that were amazing about him, and that I knew there was this core of love at between us, and it completely changed the dynamic in our relationship and in our home. And you want to know when that happened? That shift started to happen in December, just before the pandemic, which was like, oh my gosh, all four of us locked in the same house together. If I hadn't been coaching, hadn't taken responsibility for how I was showing up in that relationship, we were already as a family experiencing an icky dynamic because of the dynamic between us. If I hadn't made those changes and opened up and shifted my perspective, I can't imagine how much more horrible the pandemic would have been for our family. But instead, I distinctly remember sort of reporting into my mastermind group saying, like, I've really made some small changes that have made a huge difference. And they were like, it's amazing. Look at like, talk about divine timing.
Mhm.
So
That's
yeah,
a wonderful story.
it really has shifted. And then of course I know that it has changed the way um, our kids show up for him as well, because you don't need to say to somebody, like, people read energy, right? They can read the room, they can see how I'm treating others, and I can, say, do as I say, not as I do, but they're picking up on what I do. So yeah, I hope that it made a difference. I know that I noticed a real difference in the relationship dynamic with both of our kids and my husband and all of us as a family. So
Well,
yeah.
I will say that the pandemic spiked a lot of separations, divorces. And so that work you did prior to was probably very critical to saving your marriage and your family. And I'm happy that you did the work because it sounds like it paid off because you're on the other side of it now. So that's really great to hear.
It's true. And in fact, I just hear the hammering that's happening outside my home. I can add this. Probably about maybe 5 or 6 years ago, we had to do some repairs on the house. And so someone gave us tickets to the home show. And this was at a time where our relationship wasn't on great terms. We were still together, obviously, but we're walking around the home show and he said, what if we just like did the whole house at once? We've always talked about it. Like, why not do it? And I'm 6 years ago, 5 years ago, I'm going like, are you kidding? I don't know if I'm going to be with you next week, much less like invest in a huge renovation. So the fact that we did invest in the renovation when our relationship was back on amazing terms, as opposed to like, oh, let's just do it and hope for the best. It's like, no, we've done the work. We've had the fierce conversations.
Mm,
We've established some boundaries that we hadn't talked about before from a place of love. And so that's one reason I'm so happy about this renovation, is it really is symbolic of the strength of our relationship. So
mm. That's beautiful. And you hit on something where many people do this. They just bury themselves in the potential of something else so that they're so busy they don't have to look at the reality of what they're living in. So
yeah.
kudos to you for putting a pause on the renovation, but also for not coming at it with a sense of, well, I don't know if I'm going to be with you next week, because we do have our thoughts and our words have power. And the more
Mm,
we're putting that out there, the more we're manifesting and creating that in our circle, because our mind is always listening to ourselves. So we're not talking about the woohoo, maybe, I could manifest a new home and $1 million. We're talking about your brain always listening to you and then looking for facts and evidence to back it up. So when you switch the story as you did and looked for reasons to adore, love, and bring his greatest attributes to the table, you switch the storyline and now your brain's looking for things to reinforce that idea. So I'm really, I want to commend you and acknowledge you on that effort.
Thank you. It's not lost on me, the irony that storytelling is what I do, and that I was also a victim of so many of my own stories. But now I said, oh, okay, no wonder I'm so good at telling the disaster baiting, terrible stories where I just am criticizing myself and all the rest. Now that I can see it, I'm like, okay, well then I'm going to be great at telling the true stories that are true and aren't me going to those places where the mind wants to go, the ego wants to go, when it's not tended to, and when things are just happening on autopilot.
Absolutely. Well, kudos to you. And you talked earlier about perfectionism. And I know we're coming up to time quite soon, but I'd love to dig into that, because I believe that as women, the more we hunt for perfectionism, the more self-abuse we're putting ourselves through. And there is no such thing as perfect, because what the bar is for perfection today is not the same as tomorrow. So it's really just a way of looking for things that are wrong within ourselves and others when we're striving for that. So if we switch the paradigm from perfectionism to excellence or our personal best, it changes the storyline. Tell me about your experience with perfectionism.
Absolutely. So I used to be, as I said earlier, it was this drive that came from fear inside me to be the best, get the A's, do the awards. And how it manifested in my life was staying up really late to get things done, tormenting myself with writing the perfect whatever it was, procrastination, because I was always talking myself out of doing things and always distracted by the voice in my head saying, it's not going to be good enough. You might as well just not start. Or you should probably quit because this is never going to measure up. Right.
Yeah.
So being able to see those, like, perfectionism is a story, I believe, just like, any other. It's not true. It's completely made up. And it is an illusion that comes from fear. And so once I started to equate perfectionism as an expression of fear, I was like, oh, well, that's not me. Like I have this amazing adventurous side too. I've done a fundraiser where I rode my bike to New York with a team over 5 days. I done cold exposure therapy in Lake Ontario in the middle of winter to raise money for mental health. Like, I'm not that person who is afraid of life or of living. But when I sort of connected perfectionism and fear, I thought, I don't want to try to be that anymore, that definition of perfect. And so I started to question, like, I didn't necessarily go too deep into why am I like that. I just decided I wouldn't be like that anymore, that instead I would value other attributes, other milestones. So instead of the A, it was, as I said, like, not the performance goal, but the discovery goal. Like, I wonder how much I'm going to learn from this. I wonder what I'm going to, who I'm going to meet, or what I'm going to see that I wasn't necessarily looking for. I wonder how I'll be able to improve this once I get the feedback on it. Because I, even as a writer way back when in my career, if anybody had any red pen markings on it, I would be like, it wasn't perfect. Oh my gosh. Well, nothing is. So I just started to prioritize the learning process over and the journey over the destination, and to really try to enjoy it. Like, have fun. We're here to have fun. We're here to, find out and not necessarily give up before we try. Like, I don't want to give up until I feel like I've learned everything I'm here to learn. I don't want to stop trying before I've tried all the things that are intriguing to me. So Yeah, it really has made a huge difference for me in being able to go after what lights me up and to be able to support myself through it, to not abandon myself to those old stories, that old voice. Just really reprogramming the voice to be like, you go, girl, you can do this. We've got you. So
Amazing. That's amazing. Well, I want to acknowledge you for all the work you've done. And I know that you have brand story workshops to help other women to articulate their story and to really get out there and, as I said, spark an emotional connection and touch the heart of their consumers. Where can they find out more if someone listening wants to take this course and learn more about your framework?
amazing. Thank you. So, the best place to find out about the workshops is on my Instagram. So, I am at Upwardly, UPWORDLY, little play on words there. I do have a website, upwardlycontent.ca. This service, again, because I'm not a perfectionist anymore, this service is not on my website because it has been one that I've been sort of piloting and improving as I go, which is a radical departure for me because before it would have had to have been tested for 5 years until perfect before I would possibly release it. But instead, I realized I want to get it out there and get real time feedback so that I can continue to make revisions and improvements to it. So you have to go to my Instagram to find it. I will try to actually make a little update on my website to include a link to it, but there's tons of information through the link in my bio on Instagram.
Perfect. And I'll also share it when we send this out. So it'll be attached to this video and everybody can find you that way. Now, before we wrap, I always love to go to this little space where, for me, dealing with our inner children is so important. I, like yourself, am a mother. I know you're a mother of two grown children. I'm also
Yes.
a mother of one. And, he's off in law school right now in Birmingham. So I'm trying to parent my inner child with all the extra parenting time I have. Let's put it that way. And, we talked about being sort of hard on ourselves and saying mean things to ourselves. And, I like to think that that little girl, Tara, is always listening. So if you had to go back and talk to that little girl, Trish, and give her one piece of advice, tell her one thing that she needed to know for her journey to where you are now, what might that be?
I feel like I'm getting emotional just thinking about it. It is, I would say, follow your heart. It will never lead you in the wrong direction.
I love it. I love it. That's perfect. Well, thank you so much for spending time with us today. We've gone through so much different ebbs and flows. We've talked about your program, but really we talked about your journey through life and how you developed from someone telling you in high school, a gym teacher, that they saw the light and pushing you into leadership, and then you following leadership through your journey and eventually going out there and being brave and saying, hey, I want to be an intern, but I don't want to just be any intern. I want to be an intern that attracts the main copywriter or the main publisher's attention. And so that was really amazing. And then you continued your journey. You won multiple awards for your hard work in your magazine life, but you switched dials and you created this framework. You did your inner coaching. You kept your family whole during very difficult times. And now you're here mentoring other women, bringing in students and helping with mental health and save the environment, all while renovating a 100-year-old house. So what an amazing story. Thank you for sharing it. And for all of you out there, always remember to tell your inner child positive things, like mine is that you are always enough and you are always worthy. Thanks for listening today. I appreciate you all. And I know that if you give yourself permission, you can step into expansion. So here's to you being your best self. Thanks so much for watching. Subscribe and follow me. And also, if you want some other content, hit me up on Tara Mishral Speaks on Instagram, or join my inner circle at taramishral.com. You will be the first to receive new content when it drops, as well as the first to get the Women's Spotlight. Learn about other amazing women in our local community that are up to big things. Thanks again, with love and light. Until next time, guys.